Yeah, we can give a few minutes for people to join. It might be kind of slow since it's kind of holiday time. But yeah, I don't know if you have the agenda doc open. I wanted to just float a generic provider proposal that I'm working on with David Watson, DWAT in Slack. I don't think he'll be able to join these office hours today, but we're working on that, and we're gonna publish a draft and get everybody's feedback and comments and. But anyway, I don't know if it's something that you're interested in, or are you interested in one of the other providers, or yeah, if you have any questions or anything like that, yeah, feel free to.
Yeah, actually, I've been just attending these meetings to see how things are doing and all that. But really, I've been trying to find a place where to contribute. So
Okay.
yeah, I guess since I have you right here, I don't know, is there something that you think it'd be a good place for somebody to just get started? Something boring that you don't want to do and just want to push it aside?
That's a good question. I'm just going to look at the cluster API. Have you seen the cluster API repo?
Yes.
Okay. So in the cluster API repo, I think we have some issues that are labeled help wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some that are good first issue as well. So let me just filter on those. So cluster cuddle validate cluster run more automated checks on cluster API repo. Yeah, one of those might be one of those issues with those labels would probably be a good bet. Let me take a look at them. Some of them are a little old. And then I don't know if you've seen the docs, the Git book documentation. If you haven't, that's a good place to look. And if you see sort of details that need to be fleshed out, that would be great. I'm not sure if you've taken any of the providers for a test drive.
Yeah, no, not really, but yeah, that sounds good. I wanted to double check, especially with the issues, because I only saw three with the what is it? Good first issue, and the help wanted were a little vague, and some of them were already assigned. So I was trying to figure out if already assigned means that somebody's just working on it, or trying to get a better idea of what's something that's that people actually want to get started on, and what's something that's just we're keeping track of it right here, but don't do anything with it, kind of thing.
Got it. Yeah, the issues that I'm seeing right now that have the good first issue, I mean, one of them is related to PROW, which is the Kubernetes testing, end-to-end
Mm-hmm.
testing framework.
Yeah.
And it looks like we, in the Docker file that we send, we in that Docker file pull in etcd, but I believe that we used to do that out of necessity. Now that we're using KubeBuilder, I think KubeBuilder pulls etcd in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe revising that Docker file, that's something that you could definitely give a go. Are you interested? Are you interested in a specific provider, or what? I guess, yeah. I'm just wondering what's your interest in the cluster API?
Actually, I heard about the project from the people at the cluster lifecycle. Sounded like the work that you guys are doing. It's interesting. Providers, I would love to test it out with any Google or AWS specific things, especially since I really don't have access to Azure, VMware, or anything else. Anything else. So at least those two. If there's anything, I would really love to help.
So the providers that are being currently worked on are targeting different public clouds, right?
Yeah.
And the company where I work, we have an on-premise use case. Customers that want to be able to deploy Kubernetes where there is no infrastructure API. So internally, we've been working on a provider that targets that kind of environment. But we had some pretty tight deadlines, and we had to deviate from where a cluster API was at the time. This work for us started back in last May.
Yeah.
But now we want to come back and collaborate with Samsung, who has a similar use case. We want to work on this generic provider, and what I think one of the use cases for this generic provider is that somebody wants to start testing the cluster API, building the cluster API, but doesn't have access to like virtualized infrastructure, or public clouds.
Yeah.
Then this generic provider would be good to have, because then the idea is that, at least the way that we've implemented it, is the machines are created, the operating system is already installed on them, and then only at that point does this provider it uses SSH to invoke commands on the host and provision Kubernetes on the machines, right? So as opposed to the providers that target the public clouds, where they actually create an instance and they pass in something like a cloud init script, and there's no, for the most part, there's no there's no invocation of commands directly, but of course it requires, right? It requires that you have this infrastructure API. So I think if you are interested in in working on the cluster API, but outside of the sort of the public cloud, then you might be interested in this work that's going to start pretty soon for the generic provider.
Hell yeah. Is there anything where would you like to have some help with respect to that project?
Sure. So we're trying to, so because David and I, both of our teams have kind of had, have an implementation, but it's not really, actually, I think we just made our repos public just now. But because, we've deviated, it's not really a provider that somebody could pick up, in the way that you could pick up, the AWS or the GCP provider. But anyway, so we have this internal implementation. So we have, the things that we've learned from it. And so David and I, we want to work on on a proposal. We're gonna publish that this time next week. But I'm before we do that, so actually I should say when we do that, right, then we'll actually, once we nail down sort of the requirements, what are going to be the goals, right? Are we going to, for instance, require that we can SSH in to the machines? I know that some in the community may find that a blocker, right? Like we can't allow SSH access. So then do we have to think of some other sort of transport mechanism? So right now, I guess the most important thing is finding those requirements and those blockers. So if you have, if you have any requirements or blockers, that would be very useful to know. Otherwise, when we publish a draft, then you can always add your comments there. Yeah. And then once we nail down the proposal, then we'll start implementing. Yeah, and at that point, as much help as we can get, really would be great. I think we'll almost certainly be writing, we'll be implementing the actuators, the machine actuator, the cluster actuator.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be in Go. So it'll be similar to the other cloud provider implementations, but we will have some additional pieces. So the AWS cloud provider, I think, has some libraries to invoke AWS APIs, and then the unit tests for those. So we'll have something similar, depending on how we end up communicating with machines, right? If it's SSH, we'll have some library that where we're invoking commands with SSH. Maybe we're copying over, right? If we want to write configuration files to disk, we might be using SSH for that, or perhaps SCP. So yeah, anything, if you have any kind of interest or there, then that would be, all those contributions would be very welcome.
Yeah, sounds interesting. So also, you mentioned that you just made a repo with something. I guess you made the repo related to this available.
Yeah, so let me add that to the doc. So this is, we've been, originally we wanted to make this all open source from the beginning, but it didn't happen. And then we realized we had gone sort of so far from the upstream implementation that it really wasn't, we weren't, it wasn't something that we could just contribute. Mm-hmm. So then we didn't, make the repos public, but we thought, okay, at least if we make the repos public, at least we can talk about, what we've done for better or worse, right? There's things that we've done maybe that we don't like, but anyway, so let me add that to the doc. SSH provider. So there's that. Oops, I should say repo is public. Not directly, not compatible with current upstream. Oops, cluster API. Actually, let me double check. I think it should be public. Yeah, okay, there we go.
It is public.
Great.
Well, looks interesting.
And yeah, so then the high level design of this SSH providers, we try to keep the logic, the sort of the orchestration, the sequencing in the provider, but for the host side pieces, for instance, installing the container runtime if that's necessary, or pulling down the dependencies, things that, so we use kubeadm, but kubeadm requires that you pull down certain dependencies or, configure certain things that is out of scope for kubeadm. So we actually wrote a separate tool that we call NodeADM, and I think we just made that public as well. Let me double check. So yeah, so NodeADM, we haven't even, okay, yeah, we have kind of a README without much of a description. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the SSH provider uses etcdadm and Node ADM. Let's see. Yeah, so Node ADM is supposed to be as sort of like the is a, I guess you would describe it as a shim CLI that provides or provisions dependencies for kubeadm which are out of scope for kubeadm. And then etcd-adm, the CLI to simplify the etcd management, I guess, etcd cluster configuration.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so yeah, the plan is to draft a proposal, get feedback, and then start implementing. And yeah, I mean, at this point, obviously we don't know whether the community will be interested in something like Node ADM. The community is interested in etcd-adm. We open sourced that a couple of months ago, and it's seeing some adoption.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so we'll see. At this point, our SSH provider, and then Samsung's SSH provider, and our Node ADM, etcd-adm. Those are things that are learning. I guess we can use as experiences, and potentially use some of the code.
Yeah. Man, yeah, that's cool. So at least on my end, well, also I wanted to ask. So if I go on the cluster API and I want to help out with an issue, can I just say, can I just take it, or do I do the PR first, or what will be the preferred way to help out?
That's a good question. I think that if there is an issue, mm-hmm. and it has a label, help wanted, that's a pretty clear signal that nobody's working on it.
Yeah.
This is the office hours. Tomorrow there will be a meeting at let me double check, 10 o'clock the same time zone. So 2 hours earlier than this one started. And there we typically talk about the cluster API issues, what needs to be worked on, what needs to be reviewed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you want, if there are existing pull requests and you want to
review them,
maybe take a small one and look at it, see if there's I mean, yeah, I guess it's you may not have the context on everything, but like there's some where you might be able to sort of pick up the context just from the PR. Yeah. And then yeah, if you see some issue and you like to work on that, then yeah, just add a comment, and typically, yeah, you can reach out, maybe find that the person that opened the issue or the last person that commented on it. You can find them on Slack.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'll do that, and I'll check out the code for the SSH provider, at least to get an idea of how things work. And at least on my end, I'm pretty content with how this meeting went.
Okay, great. Yeah, and if you haven't seen them, there's a recording of a deep dive for the cluster API that was recorded at last week's KubeCon. It'll be out on YouTube.
Oh, awesome. In that case, I'll look for it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so
Great.
thank you very much.
Yeah. We'll see you next time then.
See you.
All right. I think, yeah, I'll wrap up since this is just the two of us. So,
Yeah.
all right. Take care.
You too.